Darry, hello. It is the towards the end of April, 2024, and we're here in the study to talk about Apple. I wasn't quite sure how to title this video. It could have been something like Apple Control Freak, or Apple They Want Your Business, or Apple the Bully. I'm going to talk about Apple computers over the years, and I've got some props, so hopefully that will make it more interesting. I've got my very expert Princess Helper here. I'm going to talk about the fact that over the years, Apple has increasingly tried to take control of the narrative and stop you being able to fiddle with or repair your own equipment. And this is not, as some people would try to argue, a new situation. So I've been using Apple computers probably from before 1990. So we're talking over 30 years. Let's call it 40 years, something like that. So for a long time. And I can tell you, even from the get-go, Apple computers were not very serviceable. They had a computer called the Apple II, which had some slots, and they had a marketplace where you can buy cards that would fit into the Apple II, and that was a 6502 processor, and that was 1983, something like that. That's how I remember that computer. I didn't have one. I worked on it for a friend. So in those days, the choices of Apple cards were limited because the IBM computer that came out around the same time had a much larger selection of cards, even within the few years of it being announced. And then when Apple introduced the Macintosh, which is probably something like 1990, they thought, well, we'll stop all that expandability. Let's make it a machine which is just a single motherboard and doesn't have any expansion to the end user. But at that time, Apple still used industry standard components like the disk drives and let's say the memory chips. So there was a degree of repairability to the machine. But over the years, Apple has changed the way that they do business with their software and their hardware, as I'm about to explain. And so this is a bit of a cautionary tale. So the management perspective, what I'm trying to get you around to thinking is the following. Apple wants to sell you computers. They do not appear to be very interested in repairability, except at a supported Apple Centre. They shun and disregard and have a disdain for any so the cat's on an expensive Apple computer. They shun and have a disdain for any third party or non-Apple repair centre. And so I do happen to have a friend who's completely by coincidence started to work for one of probably the largest Apple repair centre in the UK. And he gets in hundreds of machines per week, literally hundreds. But most of us, if we had a broken Apple computer, would not be so fortunate. And so practically speaking, because of the way Apple has manipulated the whole hardware and software marketplace, you're unable to go to a third party because Apple is making it between difficult and impossible for third-party maintainers to repair the machines, let alone Joe Smo, the individual. So the first prop I've got is a MacBook Pro. It's let's have a look here. Unplug this. So here we are. I'm trying to do this by example so you can see what I mean. This is an Apple MacBook Pro. It's a MacBook Pro 11.2, and can I see when that was announced? If I do the about, Apple in the top left-hand corner, do about this Mac, it says MacBook Pro Retina, 15-inch, late 2013. So that's a MacBook Pro Retina, late 2013. And that brings me to the next point, which is that over the years, Apple has tried to restrict your ability to run the latest operating system on your computer, even though it's quite easily possible. Well, not easily possible, but it's quite possible. So there's a set of enthusiasts in this world, and they produce a program called OpenCore Legacy Patcher. So I'm just going to show you that on the window here. So there's OpenCore Legacy Patcher, and getting started, and I can say, what is OpenCore? Supported models. So let's just have a look at that. So if you go down this chart, you'll see that we've got things like, these are by the year, of course. So you can see 2008, 2009, and this program, Open Core Legacy Patcher, allows you to run in most cases, the absolute latest release, the latest operating systems on these older Intel computers. So you can see a MacBook Pro. You can see this was, what did I say, late 2013. So you can see here, here we are, a MacBook Pro 11-11.1. So this is supported by Open Core Legacy Patcher. So that is how this computer, even though it's over 10 years old, which is quite astonishing to be honest, is still running the absolute latest Apple operating system, which is Sonoma. So, like I said, there's a group of enthusiasts out there and they're doing a sterling job trying to let you run the latest software on quite elderly systems. And this MacBook runs, there's something called Metal graphics, and if your computer doesn't support Metal graphics, lots of things stop working, like you can't use Apple Maps and other things like that. This does support Apple Maps and Metal graphics. So even though the computer's over 10 years old now, everything still functions. So that's an example of something that's working, but my prediction is that in the future, because Apple is clamping down on absolutely everything, OCLP and the people that support OCLP will have a between difficult and impossible job continuing. So that's prop number one. That's an over 10-year-old computer. So prop number two is something I've just bought. So we move onward to one of the most powerful Apple portable computers they ever made. And I just got this the other day. And I guess this is, in a way, could be regarded as an apology video. Like, you don't like Apple. How is it you're buying Apple computers? The reason that a lot of computer enthusiasts like Apple hardware is that it's very, very strong and very well built, and it's beautifully done, except for the repairability aspect. But in terms of aesthetics, this is a MacBook Pro. It's 2019, and it's an Intel processor. So in the world of hardware, Apple, excluding the olden days where with Apple II, which was Motorola 6502, Apple had a partnership with IBM, and at the time I had a lot to do with PowerPC on the IBM side. So IBM had a chip called PowerPC, and they wanted PowerPC to take over the world. They wanted it to replace servers at the high end, and they have in fact done that within IBM. PowerPC now rules the roost. So PowerPC is a chip that you could put in a laptop, but also could power a multi-million-pound computer, quite literally. And they sold that design to Apple. So Apple, for a long time, were using the PowerPC chips from IBM. And then they switched to Intel, which is what Microsoft Windows and the whole of the Windows crowd have been using for 15, 20 years. So at the point that Apple switched from PowerPC to Intel, Apple had a wonderful opportunity because all of a sudden they could natively run all the software that they couldn't run before. So when Apple switched to Intel, it was a fantastic moment for Apple and a worrying moment for the rest of the industry. Because overnight, with some wizardry, Apple computers could run Windows programs, and they could run them within macOS effectively. So it was an amazing moment whereby Apple computers were now able to run macOS, which no Windows computer could run, but they could also run all the Windows software. So in a way, you had the best of both worlds. And this 2019 machine is one of the last laptops that Apple produced with the Intel processor. Now this laptop, I'm so enthusiastic about having bought it, although it's totally unrepairable by me, which I'm going to come to. It's an astonishing laptop. It's beautifully made. It's cost less than £1,000. It has 32 gigabytes of memory. It has an i9 processor, and it has 4 USB-C Thunderbolt ports. Isn't that amazing? And it is built like a rock. It is absolutely amazing. So from a hardware perspective, this is brilliant. What's not so good about this? So we're talking about 2019 now. On this machine here, 2014 machine, you can upgrade the hard drive. Of course, it's an Apple proprietary hard drive, and the memory is soldered to the motherboard, so that can't be changed. But you could change the hard drive. Or if you had a machine failure, supposing your machine catastrophically failed, you could take out the hard drive, give it to a repair shop, and they could use that hard drive outside from the machine and take all your data off of it. I'm assuming you haven't made a time machine backup, which many people have an idea that they're going to make a time machine backup but never bother. So the reason for having a removable hard drive is what happens if your machine dies? Something that has been steadfastly ignored with this Apple computer. So with this Apple computer, the memory is soldered, the hard drive is not replaceable, and it's proprietary. It was more or less proprietary on this machine, but OWC, which is a well-known US company which has been selling Apple and Mac add-ons for years, they do sell a hard drive that you can put into there. So with this 2014 system, if the hard drive was to fail or I want a larger hard drive, I can do it. I personally can do it. I buy it from America. I open up the machine with a few special tools. Another thing, of course, Apple has these pentalobe screws here, which means to say you have to buy a special screwdriver. It's just incrementally awkward to do anything on an Apple machine. Anyway, so we've got to 2019. We've got this fantastic machine, which I've just purchased. I'm quite enthusiastic about purchasing it. Let's see if I can show you some of the wizardry which has been already installed, if I say so myself. So, this is not fully documented. I'm just going to show you what's possible. We'll look at in more detail how it's working in another video. So this is an Apple computer, and you'll see it's not very well organised so far. But you see there's lots of different icons, and there's a Windows icon. There's a penguin, which is a Linux icon. And there's another roundish thing, which is Ubuntu as well. And there's also the X, which is Mac OS. So this computer, unbelievably, runs, I've only had it 3 days, but sort of 3 days without sleeping later, I've managed to configure it with what's called Refined EFI Boot Manager. So there's that menu that you've just seen is coming from Refined, REFIND. And I've told it to look at the different operating systems that have been installed on this machine. And how is it possible that I've got these different operating systems? It's because this machine is using an Intel CPU. And for years, Linux has run on Intel, pretty much. There's a few exceptions, but for years, Linux has run on Intel CPUs. Windows has run on Intel CPUs. And Mac OS has run on Intel CPUs after its movement from PowerPC. So it's a bit of technical jiggling around, but it's basically working. Up to 2.5 days, about 50 hours of work. It hadn't worked, but suddenly I got it working, and I wouldn't say I'm proud of it, but it's working. So we have a machine here from 2019 that can. I'll switch this off now. Right, I can power it off. So we have a machine here from 2019, which is one of the last Intel MacBooks that was ever made. And that's able to run all the operating systems that you can possibly imagine. So if you want to rock up and you want to give a talk on Linux, or you want to do some Linux work, you can take a machine like this and you can do that work. If you want to run a Windows-specific program that can't run under Mac OS, you can take a machine like that and do your work. But Apple wasn't happy with that. Apple decided to replace the Intel CPUs with their ARM CPUs. So ARM is a British company, a Cambridge-based company. They've taken a license from the ARM Foundation. And of course, they've modified it, so it's not exactly the same as an ARM architecture. They modified it with their own proprietary changes, so no other chip could fit in an Apple-type computer. And since they don't sell the ARM chips that make Apple computers to anyone at all, you couldn't, as a third party, make an Apple-compatible computer. Whereas in the past, because macOS ran on an Intel computer, so there was a whole marketplace for what's called Hackintosh. A Hackintosh was a PC that was specially built with compatible hardware to make it easy or easier to run macOS. So if you couldn't afford to buy an Apple computer with macOS, you could buy a Hackintosh. But that marketplace has been zeroed because now Apple produces these special ARM CPU-based chips, the M1, M2, M3 range, and only Apple makes those chips. So if you wanted, as a hardware vendor, as a manufacturer, to say, hey, I'd like to produce an Apple-compatible computer, you physically can't do it. So what else have they done? They've not just done that, they've done other stuff. I thought I had an example. So one of the other things they've started to do is to make the disk layout impossibly complicated. And this is one of the reasons why I was having difficulty getting that 2019 MacBook working. So here's an example of a disk layout. And first of all, Apple decided they were going to create their own file system and badly document it. So this is called the APFS file system. And if you go to the best website in the world for this kind of thing, which is called the Eclectic Light Company, I'm going to give you an exact reference here. So there's the Eclectic Light Company website. Let me just make it more visible. So there's the Eclectic Light Company website, and I've searched for the term APFS, and you'll see there's lots of technical articles on the reference for APFS, which is woefully, well, I want to call it out of date and not very helpful. You'll see that Apple has got their own file system, and they've got a bootable area here, but then they take a container, what they call a container for disk 3, and inside that is the operating system that the modern Apple computer runs. So they have what looks like a single partition here, but inside that is another set of partitions. And what they do is they sign, so they say it's for security, but I think it could also be argued it's definitely for obfuscation, in the sense that they're making things very, very complicated. They have a pre-boot volume, a recovery volume, and an actual volume. So just booting the computer now is almost impossibly complicated. And if you want to try and interact with these partitions from another operating system, you're basically out of luck. And worse, of course, because this is all proprietary and not very well understood, there are not many tools that can change these partitions or increase or decrease them. You're restricted to what Apple gives you. So over time, Apple has had an operating system, OS X, now renamed to macOS, which is a version of Unix, which is to be complemented. However, they've made it very proprietary, and they've badly documented it such that key things you might need to look at and understand aren't understood because they've badly documented it. So we have got to the point now, my last prop, apart from the princess, you can only see the I can see the cat. Right, baby, no, don't stand on the MacBook, it's too expensive. Sorry, get off, jump. Oh, listen, you can stand there. So, my last prop is the following, and this is a brilliant product. This is a MacBook Air M2. So there's been a recent upgrade to this, and you can have an M3 based version, but there's not that much difference. I'm going to tell you why this is a brilliant product and why Apple have got so much custom with everyone. And that's because the latest series of chips that Apple uses, which are the M series chips, are ridiculously power efficient, and they make Intel look stupid. And again, this is what many tech reviewers don't really tell you, but anytime you buy an Apple laptop now, you are light years ahead of anyone that's bought an Intel laptop in terms of power consumption. Intel laptops, when plugged into the mains, can just about keep up with Apple computers. But anytime they're running on batteries, it's not even close. So this computer has such fantastic battery life and lower power consumption. There are no fans in this computer. It's totally beautifully slim. There are no fans. The battery life is at least 10 hours. And it's a sort of computer you can fully charge, go to work, you can leave the screen on all day, and you know for an absolute fact this computer will not run out of batteries. So this is an amazing computer. However, what's wrong with it? Well, it's of course running macOS, which is proprietary. It's running the M1 series of CPUs, which means to say it can't run other operating systems. That people have been trying to reverse engineer Linux for this computer. And in fact, Linus Torvalds has been trying as well, but it still isn't. It's still a work in progress. Basically, Apple doesn't provide any information on how to do that, the hardware schematics or the register settings and so forth. And so people are just trying to reverse engineer everything. And because of that, it's impossible. I can't believe people are even trying, but people are trying. But on the plus side, this is an amazing computer. If you stick with Mac OS, you've got a computer that lasts for a full day's just work. It's slim, it's lightweight, it goes at full speed with this low power consumption, contrasting with any Intel machine, even an Intel MacBook like this 2019 model. This will just, if you want it to go quickly, this will just take a lot of power. So you're now, between the devil and the deep blue sea, you can buy into Apple's closed environment. They have a machine which is basically totally unserviceable by the end user or by any third-party technician. There is no way to take or change the memory. There is no way to take or change the hard drive. And in fact, some of these models are actually keyed. So people have done tests where they've taken two Apple computers, they've unsoldered the multi-pad, multi-contact hard drive, and they've swapped it for another identically spec'd machine. It doesn't work because it's keyed to that machine. A bit like the Apple iPhone screens are keyed to your iPhone. A similar swap problem has been found there. So you're between the devil and deep blue sea. You can invest. You can use Apple computers in 2024, but be clear what you're buying into. You're buying into a computer that is essentially not user serviceable, not serviceable by third parties, and in 10 years' time, or substantially less, this computer will not be in the same position as this old Apple computer. So this is this 10-year-old Apple computer with an Intel CPU, with a replaceable hard drive, with OCLP still running the latest release of Mac OS. Apple are restricting things. And this computer in 10 years' time, I'm pretty much sure, will be a piece of scrap. So, support Apple at your peril. They're producing some brilliant equipment, but don't be very aware of what you're buying yourself into. You're buying into computers that do and work and behave only as Apple want you to use, and I think will be on the scrap heap in a much shorter time frame than the most Windows laptops or older Apple computers. That's my sermon for today. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks very much for listening.